Tannoah relaxation videos for another whisper reading video. If you enjoy these videos, please like, share, and subscribe. It helps the channel out greatly. Remember to hit the bell to not miss any of our upcoming videos. If you need high-quality earbuds or earphones to enhance your ASMR whisper reading, check out the links in the description. They are affiliate links, and if you click and purchase, I will earn a commission at no extra cost to you, which helps me continue to make these videos. In this video, I will be whisper reading two classic short fairy tales from Grimm's Fairy Tales. The two tales are Fitcher's Bird and the robber Bridegroom. We hope you enjoy the video. Fitcher's Bird. There was once a wizard who used to take the form of a poor man and went to houses and begged and caught pretty girls. No one knew whither he carried them, for they were never seen more. One day he appeared before the door of a man who had 3 pretty daughters. He looked like a poor weak beggar and carried a basket on his back, as if he meant to collect charitable gifts in it. He begged for a little food, and when the eldest daughter came out and was just reaching him a piece of bread, he did but touch her, and she was forced to jump into his basket. Thereupon he hurried away with long strides and carried her away into a dark forest to his house, which stood in the midst of it. Everything in the house was magnificent. He gave her whatsoever she could possibly desire, and said, "My darling, thou wilt certainly be happy with me, for thou hast everything thy heart can wish for." This lasted a few days, and then he said, "I must journey forth, and leave thee alone for a short time. There are the keys of the house. Thou mayst go everywhere and look at everything except into one room, which this little key here opens, and there I forbid thee to go on pain of death." He likewise gave her an egg and said, "Preserve the egg carefully for me, and carry it continually about with thee, for a great misfortune would arise from the loss of it." She took the keys and the egg and promised to obey him in everything. When he was gone, she went all around the house from the bottom to the top and examined everything. The rooms shone with silver and gold, and she thought she had never seen such great splendor. At length she came to the forbidden door. She wished to pass it by, but curiosity let her have no rest. She examined the key. It looked just like any other. She put it in the keyhole and turned it a little, and the door sprang open. But what did she see when she went in? A great bloody basin stood in the middle of the room, and therein lay human beings, dead and hewn to pieces, and hard by was a block of wood, and a gleaming axe lay upon it. She was so terribly alarmed that the egg which she held in her hand fell into the basin. She got it out and washed the blood off, but in vain. It appeared again in a moment. She washed and scrubbed, but she could not get it out. It was not long before the man came back from his journey, and the first thing which he asked for were the key and the egg. She gave them to him, but she trembled as she did so, and he saw at once by the red spots that she had been in the bloody chamber. "Since thou hast gone into the room against my will," said he, "thou shalt go back into it against thine own. Thy life is ended." He threw her down, dragged her hither by her hair, cut her head off on the block, and hewn her into pieces, so that her blood ran on the ground. Then he threw her into the basin with the rest. "Now I will fetch myself the second," said the wizard, and again he went to the house by the shape of a poor man and begged. Then the second daughter brought him a piece of bread. He caught her like the first by simply touching her and carried her away. She did not fare better than her sister. She allowed herself to be led away by her curiosity, opened the door of the bloody chamber, looked in, and had to atone for it with her life on the wizard's return. Then he went and brought the third sister, but she was clever and crafty. When he had given her the key and the egg, and had left her, she first put the egg away with great care, and then she examined the house, and at last went into the forbidden room. Alas, what did she behold? Both her sisters lay there in the basin, cruelly murdered and cut in pieces. But she began to gather their limbs together and put them in order, head, body, arms, and legs. And when nothing further was wanting, the limbs began to move and unite themselves together, and both the maidens opened their eyes and were once more alive. Then they rejoiced and kissed and caressed each other. On his arrival, the man at once demanded the keys and the egg, and as he could perceive no trace of blood on it, he said, "Thou hast stood the test. Thou shalt be my bride." He now had no longer any power over her, and was forced to do whatever she desired. "Oh, very well," said she. "Thou shalt first take a basket full of gold to my father and mother, and carry it thyself on thy back. In the meantime, I will prepare for the wedding." Then she ran to her sisters, whom she had hidden in the little chamber, and said, "The moment has come when I shall save you. The wretch shall himself carry you home again, but as soon as you are home, send help to me." So she put both of them in the basket and covered them quite over with gold, so that nothing of them was to be seen. Then she called in the wizard and said to him, "Now carry the basket away, but I shall look through my little window and watch to see if thou stoppest on the way, to stand or to rest." The wizard raised the basket on his back and went away with it, but it weighed him down so heavily that the perspiration streamed from his face. Then he sat down and wanted to rest a while, but immediately one of the girls in the basket cried, "I am looking through my little window, and I see that thou art resting. Wilt thou go on at once?" He thought it was his bride who was calling back to him, and got up on his legs again. Once more he was going to sit down, but instantly she cried, "I am looking through my little window, and I see that thou art resting. Wilt thou go on directly?" And whenever he stood still, she cried this, and then he was forced to go onwards until at last, groaning and out of breath, he took the basket with the gold and the two maidens into their parents' house. At home, however, the bridegroom prepared the marriage feast and sent invitations to the friends of the wizard. Then she took a skull with grinning teeth, put some ornaments on it, and a wreath of flowers, carried it upstairs to the garret window, and let it look out from thence. When all was ready, she got into a barrel of honey, and then cut the feather bed open and rolled herself in it until she looked like a wondrous bird, and no one could recognize her. Then she went out of the house, and on her way she met some of the wedding guests, who asked, "Oh, Fitcher's bird, how comest thou here?" "I come from Fitcher's house quite near." "And what may the young bride be doing?" "From cellar to garret she's swept all clean, and now from the window she's peeping, I ween." At last she met the bridegroom, who was coming slowly back. He, like the others, asked, "O Fitcher's bird, how comest thou here?" "I come from Fitcher's house quite near." "And what may the young bride be doing?" "From cellar to garret she's swept all clean, and now from the window she's peeping, I ween." The bridegroom looked up and saw the decked-out skull, thought it was his bride, and nodded to her, greeting her kindly. But when he and his guest had all gone into the house, the brothers and kinsmen of the bride, who had been sent to rescue her, arrived. They locked all the doors of the house that no one might escape, set fire to it, and the wizard and all his crew had to burn. The Robber Bridegroom. There was once on a time a miller who had a beautiful daughter, and as she was grown up, he wished that she was provided for and well married. He thought, if any good suitor comes and asks for her, I will give her to him. Not long afterwards a suitor came, who appeared to be very rich, and as the miller had no fault to find with him, he promised his daughter to him. The maiden, however, did not like him quite so much as a girl should like the man to whom she is engaged, and had no confidence in him. Whenever she saw or thought of him, she felt a secret horror. Once he said to her, "Thou art my betrothed, and yet thou hast never once paid me a visit." The maiden replied, "I know not where thy house is." Then said the bridegroom, "My house is out there in the dark forest." She tried to excuse herself, and said she could not find the way there. The bridegroom said, "Next Sunday thou must come out there to me. I have already invited the guest, and I will strew ashes in order that thou mayst find thy way through the forest." When Sunday came, and the maiden had to set out on her way, she became very uneasy. She herself knew not exactly why, and to mark her way, she filled her pockets full of peas and lentils. Ashes were strewn at the entrance of the forest, and as she followed, at every step she threw a couple of peas on the ground. She walked almost the whole day until she reached the middle of the forest, where it was the darkest, and there stood a solitary house, which she did not like, for it looked so dark and dismal. She went inside it, but no one was within, and the most absolute stillness reigned. Suddenly a voice cried, turn back, young maiden dear. 'Tis a murderer's house you enter here." The maiden looked up and saw that the voice came from a bird, which was hanging in a cage on the wall. Again it cried, turn back, young maiden dear. 'Tis a murderer's house you enter here." Then the young maiden went on farther from one room to another, and walked through the whole house, but it was entirely empty, and not one human being was to be found. At last she came to the cellar, and there sat an extremely aged woman, whose head shook constantly. "Can you not tell me," said the maiden, "if my betrothed lives here?" "Alas, poor child," replied the old woman, "whither hast thou come? Thou art in a murderer's den. Thou thinkest thou art a bride soon to be married, but thou wilt keep thy wedding with death. Look, I have been forced to put a great kettle on there, with water in it, and when they have thee in their power, they will cut thee to pieces without mercy, will cook thee and eat thee, for they are eaters of human flesh. If I do not have compassion on thee, and save thee, thou art lost." Thereupon the old woman led her behind a great hogshead, where she could not be seen. "Be as still as a mouse," said she. "Do not make a sound or move, or all will be over with thee. At night, when the robbers are asleep, we will escape. I have long awaited for an opportunity." Hardly was this done, then the godless crew came home. They dragged with them another young girl. They were drunk, and paid no heed to her screams and lamentations. They gave her wine to drink, 3 glasses full, 1 glass of white wine, 1 glass of red, and a glass of yellow, and with this their heart burst in twain. Thereupon they tore off her delicate raiment, laid her on the table, cut her beautiful body into pieces, and strewn salt thereupon. The poor bride behind the cask trembled and shook, for she saw right well what fate the robbers had destined for her. One of them noticed a gold ring on the little finger of the murdered girl, and as it would not come off at once, He took an axe and cut the finger off, but it sprang up into the air, away over the cask, and fell straight into the bride's bosom. The robber took a candle and wanted to look for it, but could not find it. Then another of them said, "Hast thou looked behind the great hog's head?" But the old woman cried, "Come and get something to eat, and leave off looking till morning. The finger won't run away from you." Then the robbers said, "The old woman is right," and gave up their search, and sat down to eat. And the old woman poured a sleeping draught in their wine, so that they soon lay down in the cellar and slept and snored. When the bride heard that, she came out from behind the hogshead, and had to step over the sleepers, for they lay in rows on the ground, and great was her terror, lest she would awaken one of them. But God helped her, and she got safely over. The old woman went up with her, opened the doors, and then hurried out of the murderer's den, with all the speed in their power. The wind had blown away the strewn ashes, but the peas and lentils had sprouted and grown up, and showed them the way in the moonlight. They walked the whole night until in the morning they arrived at the mill, and then the maiden told her father everything exactly as it had happened. When the day came when the wedding was to be celebrated, the bridegroom appeared, and the miller had invited all his relations and friends. As they sat at the table, each head was bidden to relate something. The bride sat still and said nothing. Then said the bridegroom to the bride, "Come, my darling, dost thou know nothing? Relate something to us like the rest." She replied, "Then I will relate a dream. I was walking along through a wood, and at last I came to a house in which no living soul was, but on the wall there was a bird in a cage which cried, 'Turn back, young maiden dear, 'tis a murderer's house you enter here.' And this it cried once more, 'My darling, I only dreamt this.' Then I went through all the rooms, and they were all empty. Now there was something so horrible about them. At last I went down into the cellar, and there was a very, very old woman whose head shook. I asked her, 'Does my bridegroom live in this house?' She answered, 'Alas, poor child, thou hast got into a murderer's den. Thy bridegroom does live here, but he will hew thee to pieces and kill thee, and then he will cook thee and eat thee.' My darling, I only dreamt this, but the old woman hid me behind a great hogshead, and scarcely was I hidden when the robbers came home, dragged a maiden with them, to whom they gave 3 kinds of wine to drink, red, white, and yellow, with which her heart broke in twain. My darling, I only dreamt this." Thereupon they pulled off her pretty clothes, and hewed her body to pieces on the table, and sprinkled them with salt. My darling, I only dreamt this. And one of the robbers saw that there was still a ring on her finger, and it was hard to draw off. He took an axe and cut it off, but the finger sprang up into the air, and sprang behind the great hogshead, and fell in my bosom. And there is the finger with the ring. And with these words she drew it forth and showed it to those present. The robber who had done this story, who had during this story become as pale as ashes, leapt up and wanted to escape, but the guests held him fast and delivered him over to justice. Then he and his whole troop were executed for their infamous deeds. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you have any suggestions, please leave a comment. On behalf of Tannoah Relaxation Videos, we hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching. I hope to see you soon for more whispery